Hello people, my name is Carson, and I'll be going over Organismal Biology Chapter 1. So, what is a living organism? A living organism is made of cells. It can replicate by itself. It evolves, stores and passes down information, and uses and stores energy. I'll be going in depth over each of these concepts in this chapter. 1.2 is cell theory. Robert Hooke was the first to make a microscope, but he wasn't the best at it. He was, however, able to identify cells. Van Leeuwenhoek made his own microscope, which was better than Hooke's, and using which he discovered and identified different types of organisms, such as bacteria. Back in the old days, people assumed that organisms can spawn out of nothing. This is called spontaneous generation. But Rudolf Virchow contested the idea and said that all cells come from pre-existing cells. Pasteur also did an experiment using a swan neck, in which he found that after killing the bacteria in the swan neck bottle, there was no bacteria that spawns in the bottle. So if all the cells come from pre-existing cells, where does the first cell come from? The answer is chemical evolution. And we hypothesize that non-living inorganic things come together to form the first cell. So moving on to 1.3 is evolution. Evolution applies to populations and not individuals, and it is through a process called natural selection. Evolution applies to populations, but natural selection applies to individuals. So how does natural selection work? Say that in a certain environment, some wolves have longer legs than other wolves. The wolves with longer legs survive and reproduce better because they're better at hunting down prey than wolves with shorter legs. And because of that, nature selects against the wolves with shorter legs because they won't be able to survive and pass down their genes. And in that population over time, we should see wolves with longer legs. In this scenario, individual wolves are being selected upon in natural selection. And the population of wolves will change over time because we should see more wolves with longer legs. Also, having long legs is an advantage, and we call this an adaptation. An adaptation is basically anything that could benefit the fitness. And fitness is the ability to survive and reproduce. The wolves with long legs have the adaptation and therefore higher fitness. And because the long legs can also be observed in the offspring of the babies of these wolves, we call this trait heritable. And finally, speciation is when a population evolved to be so different from other populations that it becomes its own species. Alright, moving on to 1.4, which is information. So, all living organisms also stores and pass down their information. This is described by chromosomal theory of inheritance. All organisms store their information as their genes in their DNA, and that DNA can be found on the chromosome. For example, I have the gene that codes for eye color, and that is coded by the gene in the DNA. In humans, we have 2 pairs of each chromosome, a total of 46 chromosomes. And there's something called the central dogma. And when you hear or read about the central dogma in biology, it's referring to the fact that DNA goes to RNA and RNAs to proteins. When RNA is made from DNA, it is called transcription. And when proteins are made from RNA, it is called translation. And the proteins basically does everything in the cell. And since we say that we are made of cells, we can also say that we are basically made of proteins, which come from the DNA. So where does the cell get all its energy to build proteins? The energy is stored in ATP, which stands for adenosine triphosphate. And when you eat others and metabolize the organic material, you can extract ATP from the food. And when you are working out or taking notes, your body is also expending those ATP. So next, we talk about the phylogenetic tree. The phylogenetic tree is basically a family tree that explains the relationship between the different species. And scientists make up this tree using the species DNA data. The most universal of this tree is called the tree of life, in which we found that there are 3 domains: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. Animals and plants are eukarya, Furthermore, we also kind of classified bacteria and archaea into the categories prokaryotes, which means they don't have a nucleus. Humans and other eukaryotic cells have a nucleus, so we are called eukaryotes. The nucleus is basically a shell in the middle of the cell that stores the DNA. And since bacteria and archaea are considered prokaryotes, they do not have a nucleus. We also found a way to name species. And we do so by stating the genus name and the species name. For example, for humans, the genus name is Homo, and the species name is Sapiens. H in Homo should be capitalized, and both words should be italicized. So that is basically chapter 1 in a nutshell. And I prepared a little worksheet that we can go over together. So, what is evolution? Evolution is a change of blank over time. We said that evolution applies to populations. So evolution is a change of the population over time. So what is a population? A population is a group of individuals of the same species, same place, and the same time. Alright, what is in this picture? It seems that the birds are picking off the green beetles, and the orange beetles are left untouched. So we could say that the orange beetle have the adaptation of having orange skin, and the beetles with green skin does not have the adaptation. So we could say that the orange beetles have a higher fitness than the green beetles. So after many generations, we should see more orange beetles than green beetles. And this is basically natural selection in a nutshell, because the birds are picking off individual beetles. So natural selection applies to individuals. What does it mean for something to be heritable? For a trait to be heritable, it has to be in your DNA. And you must also be able to find the same trait in the offsprings. So if a trait is heritable, it could be passed down. How do we get new species? Through speciation. If a population were to evolve differently than other populations over time, they will be so different that they will be so different than the other populations that they become their own species. In biological terms, what is fitness and adaptation? Fitness is ability to survive and reproduce. Adaptation is something that benefits the fitness. Explain the chromosomal theory of inheritance. So traits are coded by the genes in the DNA, and that DNA could be passed down to the offsprings. What is a central dogma? DNA to RNA to proteins. How do we store energy? Using ATP. What is a phylogenetic tree? The phylogenetic tree is a tree of relationships that describes the relationships between different species. What is the difference between prokaryotes and eukaryotes? Prokaryotes do not have a nucleus. Eukaryotes have a nucleus. Also, prokaryotes are usually only made of one cell. Eukaryotes usually have more than one cell. What is a proper taxonomical name for humans? Homo sapiens, with Homo being the H in Homo being capitalized, and Homo sapiens, both of the words should be italicized. So that's all I have for you for this video. Thank you for watching.